Well, to talk more about the final communique and the meeting of the First Ministers, I'm joined now by the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Premier Smith, thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
So the final communique, perhaps not outlining the final projects that people thought it might, but it did mention the Western Arctic Corridor. How important was that for you?
I think it's going to be an amazing project, and the fact that all 7 premiers in the West came together at our last Western Premiers meeting to identify, which I think is a visionary project that would see a corridor stretch from, call it Port of Prince Rupert, to the Port of Churchill, or one port on either coast that may not be exactly at that, depending on what it is the private sector says. It opens up a lot of opportunity to have a good conversation about oil pipelines, gas pipelines, transmission lines, doubling the rail lines so that you can do more export of food and fiber and other products. And so I think what you're seeing is that all of the premiers are trying to find a way to propose a project where there's mutual benefit. And I think those are projects that are very attractive to the Prime Minister, so I was pleased to see that he identified that.
Identified that project in particular. What about the spirit and the tone overall? Because you come in with a number of asks of Ottawa from Alberta. This corridor is just one. So how does this set into motion the partnership that you see as having with this Prime Minister?
Well, I think what we've seen is that he's not afraid to talk about being an energy superpower. He's not afraid to define that as being both conventional as well as new and clean energy. He's not afraid to mention the word pipeline and in conjunction with oil and gas. And all of that is a dramatic improvement over what we were witnessing from even just 6 months ago. I think that there's a recognition that with the value of the product that we have in Alberta, our bitumen is probably the highest value product that we have in the country. We've priced it out with 165 billion recoverable barrels at today's prices. It's a $9 trillion asset. You just simply wouldn't leave a $9 trillion asset in the ground when there's so much opportunity for both provincial as well as the federal government to benefit. And so we're trying to conceive of a project to try to find some common ground. So when we talk about building a new bitumen pipeline, understanding that the Pathways Group has been wanting to have a decarbonization in their production, those two things, I think, are able to allow for us to have a win-win. And that's what we're advancing, and it seems like we're having a breakthrough with this Prime Minister. That being said, I don't think it'll be a success if we have to have the federal government build the pipeline. I think we have to create the conditions where the private sector has confidence that they can build it in a reasonable period of time, that there's going to be not only a yes on the permitting, but also a yes on the construction. And that's what we've got to do some work on, because the 9 terrible policies that created the poor investment environment we have right now still need to be either repealed or dramatically revised. And so I'll be looking to see how that process goes as well.
Let's dig a little bit into pathways, though, because you mentioned pathways, very key in terms of decarbonizing the oil that's extracted from the sands. What do you say to the very fact that this Prime Minister seems very enthusiastic about that proposal? How likely do you think it's going to happen?
I think that the Pathways is going to, it's really a cost to the industry. It's about $10 to $20 billion without any possibility of creating a revenue stream out of that. That's why talking about Pathways on its own is difficult. But if you talk about Pathways in conjunction with a brand new pipeline that might get another 1 million barrels of oil per day to market, now you've got a revenue stream that can be able to support that project. And we'll find out things in doing so. When you make a project at scale like that, with the pore space that we have mapped out in Alberta, I think that is going to create an attraction for other companies to come and for them to also have the same opportunity to get better and better at that technology, and it could become an export product for us. We are already, along with Saskatchewan, at the lead in having at-scale mega projects that have captured CO2. And so I think that the fact that he's looking at those two things together, that is the very definition of trying to find an area of mutual satisfaction and interest. And so I'm prepared to walk down that pathway and see if we can get to the finish line. I'm hopeful that we will. So it's certainly a change of tone that is welcome, but I think there's still an awful lot of work to do to be able to take the words and put them into action.
So change of tone from Prime Minister Carney. What about Premier Eby, though? Because out of the Western Premiers Conference and having the discussion around this corridor from Prince Rupert to Churchill, now is this hesitancy, it seems, to actually go forward to Prince Rupert. What would you say to that?
I would say this is why we have to focus on the corridor, because I think that I'm very supportive, along with Premier Eby, of finding ways to get new markets for natural gas, for LNG, for ammonia. I think as well critical minerals, the twinning of the CN rail line. If we can talk in terms of our common interests so that not only does British Columbia benefit, but so do we in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. If you can get that rail line going into the Ring of Fire, Ontario benefits, have it go up north to the Yukon and Northwest Territories, our territorial friends benefit as well. That's, to me, where I think you end up with the common ground. If people can see the way they benefit, then this becomes an additional aspect that goes into a corridor. I think that's what we've learned, is that if you're going to lead with a project, it's got to be one where everybody sees the mutual benefit. And so he may not be as enthusiastic about a bitumen pipeline, but he knows I am and will be. And so if I can find a proponent and we can work through the regulatory process with the Prime Minister, I'm confident it will get built.
Can you talk a bit more about the benefit, economic benefit in particular? Because I think sometimes Canadians will hear this debate and say, well, that might be of benefit to Alberta, but what about my region of the country? What do you say to that?
Well, if Northern Gateway had been built, it was a 595,000 barrel a day project. Canada would have benefited to the tune of $59 billion. That's how much revenue would have flown to the federal government, and provinces would have gotten $72 billion worth of benefit. Lots of that going to Alberta, but also with the spin-offs to all of the different provinces as well. That's a lot of money that can go to build a lot of schools and hospitals and roads and infrastructure. And so that's what is the foregone revenue, because that project didn't get built when it should have. When we look at that, along with Energy East, along with Keystone XL, it just magnifies it. We could have by now had 2.5 million barrels per day more of production. That's $55 billion worth of GDP value. And the split, again, we benefit at the provincial level almost as much as the federal government does. So when the federal government is able to get those dollars, they're able to share them in the rest of the country. And that's part of the value proposition about why we want to see those projects built. It's even getting more so as we start talking to each other about, well, if we need to build 42-inch pipe, where can we get that from? Who can produce it? Right now, I think there's only one place in Canada that can. So why don't we find a way to retool our factories so we can build more of the products that we need for those major projects in-house? And that's, I think, the really constructive conversation that's now happening across the country, is that if we have an American partner that doesn't want to buy our products anymore, how do we buy more from each other? And I think that that's going to be the other way that we have additional benefits. So maybe why you saw so much common cause around the table today.
I know I'm quickly running out of time here, but I have to ask you, because you said today's meeting would have significance over national unity. Mm-hmm. Now that the meeting is done, what would you say about the state of national unity? What would you say about the message being sent to Albertans? I
think it's a first step of a multi-step process. I think that having words on the page is one thing, but having that translate into action is another. I think what Albertans will be judging is there an appetite to get a project built? Is there an approval process that leads to a yes, and are there shovels in the ground? That's the kind of thing that they'll be looking for. But I think mostly it's a spirit of cooperation with the federal government, which we haven't had for some time. And I'll have a better idea as we go forward, looking at some of the modifications that need to be made to those 9 bad bills to see if that spirit of cooperation continues. I'm hopeful, but I know that the Prime Minister has tensions within his own caucus. I think he campaigned, though, on being an energy superpower. And to do that, you've got to do things differently than the way we've done them for the past 10 years. The same policies that crushed investment are not going to be the ones to see us through. So I think I made that point, and we'll see whether or not the Parliament is able to pass policies on that front to be able to change the direction.
Our next conversation, we'll talk more about the environmental assessment law. We'll talk more about tankers in British Columbian waters. But Premier, for the time this evening, thank you very much.
Thank you.